In the anime, we're thrown back to the year 447 in the Holy God calendar, a time when gods, spirits, and magic didn't just rule the world, they basically had a monopoly on it. It's like if Google, Apple, and Amazon merged and decided to run a fantasy universe. Here, we meet Leonis, dead Magnus, the last demon lord, reigning over the goth-sounding capital, Necrosa. Sounds like a great place for a heavy metal concert, right? In Necros, there's a grand finale battle brewing between Team Demon King and the 6 heroes, think Avengers, but with more capes and less quips. Then, in a plot twist as predictable as a cat video going viral, a servant rushes in to tell Leonis that they're losing ground faster than a sandcastle at high tide. The transcendent castle in Azra, fallen, the Dark Dragon's mountains, also fallen, and the great underwater city, you guessed it, fallen. Basically, if it's a cool place in this anime, it's fallen, except for Necrosa. But the episode's young, give it time. Now, the 6 heroes focus their entire offensive here at the Fortress Death Hall. Subsequently, the Great Black Wolf adds that the Goblin Lord Diesel and the Beast Lord Gason were also defeated a long time ago. Due to this, clearly, the Fortress Death Hall is the only one left, but suddenly, Leonis is surprised to hear that the heroes have already arrived at the fortress. Upon seeing his magical crystal ball, he observes that Archael, the Great Sage, is attempting to attack the fortress. He thinks that, like the Holy Tears and the Snake Lord Gisar, Archael has renounced his dignity to kneel before the gods, and therefore deserves to be incinerated by their flames of darkness. However, as he prepares to fight, the Great Wolf asks him to stop. Similar to the Goddess of Rebellion, he does not want him to fall defeated as the last Demon King. Leonis agrees, as he has to ensure that he fulfills the promise he made to Roselia. So, he contemplates accepting defeat, and before his castle is destroyed, he heads to hibernation, promising the humans that he will return 100 years later to reclaim his throne. The scene changes, and 1,000 years later, 2 young members of Squad 18 are investigating underground ruins during their research. They have reached the 7th floor of the ruins, and from there, they inform their team that there is no magical anomaly or anything related to the activity of Void. Therefore, from the central command, they remind Celia that it's just an exploration mission, and if they find something, they should automatically flee. But suddenly, their communication is cut off, and Regina tells Celia not to be carried away, as it will clearly be difficult to return. Celia explains that they do this because voids are creatures that build their nests in the depths of ruins, so they cannot allow them to go out of control. And while advancing, they come across a strange statue that catches their attention. The young Celia thinks that they are funerary objects that have a personal meaning buried with the deceased, and upon hearing this, Regina asks if they buried some mega important king here. So Celia thinks that if this is the king, he must feel very lonely here in the depths. Next, they reach a large door that is active, apparently a magical device. But when they try to open it, they can't. Due to this, Celia approaches to investigate. She sees something written on the door and tries to find out what language it is in. However, no matter how familiar it seems to her, she thinks it will be difficult to decipher the message. But suddenly, she touches the door, and after activating something, it opens automatically. Very surprised, Celia prepares her weapon. Meanwhile, in front of her, purple flames ignite, illuminating her path. The young woman advances, and in doing so, her magical detector is destroyed, so she complains about what is happening at that moment. Upon reaching the end of the path, she notices that inside the object, she can see that there seems to be a person. In the next scene, we go back to the past and see that Leonis managed to find Roselia, who told him that within a millennium, a vessel for his power would appear in the form of a human child, and it is his duty to find it. After saying that, Roselia leaves, asking Leonis to find her at some point. Next, we can see how Celia tries to destroy the object, where clearly a person is inside. Meanwhile, from the inside, the protagonist complains that the seal of the magical barrier they had made this mausoleum totally inaccessible. Leonis wonders if 1,000 years have already passed, and believes that the reincarnation ritual was successful. Seeing that someone is trying to destroy his vessel, he uses a linguistic analysis spell. He thinks that it's a tomb raider, so he decided to cause their death. Leonis destroys the crystal protecting him, and upon coming out, he sees Celia, whom he considers very beautiful and thinks she is a high elf, but upon closer inspection, he thinks she is even more beautiful than a high elf. And suddenly, Celia opens her eyes. So Leonis remembers that he was about to kill her, but is surprised to hear that the girl is very confused because she doesn't know how a child ended up in this place. Subsequently, Leonis sees his reflection in the crystal, causing his concern as he thinks that the ritual has failed and wonders why he reverted to the form he had when he was known as Leonis, the hero. Meanwhile, Celia interrupts him and asks how he got trapped in that crystal, but Leonis cannot answer as he is very nervous because she suddenly started examining his body. Celia thinks he can't speak because he's in shock and clearly believes that shock is making his memories completely blurry. Because of this, she decides to hug him and promises to keep him safe. Leonis is upset because he feels disrespected, and then he faints when he suddenly feels a pleasant sensation. The scene changes, and now Leonis is eating cookies with Celia. The protagonist complains that his body is pathetic since he lost his sense of taste and even lost consciousness just because he was hungry, which seems like a great shame. But later, as he looks attentively at Celia, he thinks about how she shared her reasons with him, and perhaps he owes her his life. Then, Celia introduces herself as Rizelia Rei Crystalia, a swordshine in training who is only 15 years old, and also a member of the 18th Squad of the Academy of the Sacred Sword of the 7th Assault Garden. However, Leonis, upon hearing her, realizes that he only understood her name and age, as he didn't understand anything else she said. Celia, in turn, asks him his name, to which the protagonist, thinking of pretending to be a child, replies that his name is Leonis Magnus. Saying this, he sees that she is completely pensive. Leonie thinks that his reputation will be transmitted from generation to generation as a legend. However, he is surprised to see that Celia thinks he is a very adorable man, which clearly disappoints the protagonist. The young woman asks the Demon King about his age, and he replies that he thinks he is 10 years old. So now Celia knows his age and tells him it's impossible that he came here by himself. Therefore, she believes that someone may have kidnapped him and then locked him in this place. Celia asks if, by any chance, a void did not lock him up. Upon hearing this, Leonis is surprised because he doesn't know what that is. The scene changes, and we see Regina getting ready for battle upon hearing that her detector has gone crazy. On the other hand, Celia tells the protagonist that voids are enemies of humanity that appeared 64 years ago, and they still don't know what they are or what they want. The theory is that they came from another world, but the protagonist, upon hearing this, believes that he never received a less enlightening explanation than this. She continues to tell him that she came here to investigate the outbreaks, clearly from the void, as they are common in ancient ruins. Leonis asks in what year of the calendar of the holy god they are, and upon hearing about this calendar, she wonders what it is. Then Celia replies that they are in the 64th year of the unified human calendar. To the protagonist's surprise, who doesn't understand what she's talking about, they are interrupted by a loud explosion. Regina communicates to Celia that she has detected a colossal void and that it is clearly in combat. Next, the void reaches the room where the Leonis and Celia are. Upon seeing the void, Celia is surprised that it is one of the ogre classes. The protagonist, upon hearing her, wonders what that means since the void doesn't look anything like an ogre. Celia starts shooting at the void and can't hurt him, so he keeps advancing. The protagonist, on the other hand, seeing that they are destroying the great underground mausoleum where his comrades clearly rest, decides to intervene. However, when he tries to use his powers, he stumbles over his own clothing and falls to the ground. Celia, on her part, discovers that her weapon cannot hurt him at all, and she thinks they are in trouble. However, Regina returns and manages to save them because, with her great weapon, she does a lot of damage to the void, who manages to recover and prepares to fight again. Therefore, Regina uses her sacred sword to launch another more powerful impact. Leonis is surprised to see that they don't use magic, and he is also surprised when he sees that the void resisted an attack of great power. Later, Regina orders Celia to take the child to the exit since she will take care of the void. In the next scene, Leonis, hand in hand with Celia, complains that the reincarnation plan is not going as clearly planned because he thinks that with this fragile body, he cannot restore his kingdom to achieve its former glory. Besides, the void have destroyed the mausoleum, which tempts him to return to finish it, but he also thinks that, if he does, he will lose his only source of information because he would reveal his entire identity. Suddenly, his departure is interrupted by the appearance of another void, which is of the Wyvern class according to Celia. Celia asks the protagonist to flee, and he refuses because he thinks that he should eliminate the void, clearly revealing his identity, but when he decides to do so before attacking. Celia hits him to ask him to escape. However, this only causes her to lower her guard and receive a blow from the void. Leonis watches as Celia dies and wonders why she did this. With her last breath, Celia asks him to find Regina so they can reach the surface and apologizes for not being able to protect him. Leonis, seeing her die, tells her, deeply moved, that she is foolish not to believe that he can withstand the weak blow of a void. Later, as the voids try to attack unsuccessfully, he thinks that he left her alive to have fun and gather information, so he prepares to fight, admitting that the girl is brave and he kind of likes her. Leonis stares directly at the void and condemns it to a fate worse than death. He casts a gravity phase spell called Birasuo and then strikes his staff, declaring his death automatically. He takes care of the rest of the voids, demonstrating great power in manipulating spells. However, after finishing off the voids, he is upset to see that one of them preserved its bones instead of turning to ashes. Leonis complains that, in this body, his magical powers are only a third of the strength he once had. Later, looking at Celia's body, he thinks that she is a demon king, realizing that human life clearly does not matter to him. Nevertheless, he feels that he should pay tribute to a noble soul like Celia's since she risked her life trying to protect him. Recognizing her valor and strength, he decides to use his magic to try to heal her, even though he is not very skilled at it. Finally, Leonis manages to bring the young woman back to life and thinks that when she wakes up, she will discover the truth and be angry with him. Suddenly, they hear Reina trying to communicate with Celia through a long-distance magical communication device. The protagonist is surprised that humans have been able to develop such advanced technology. Subsequently, Celia wakes up, seeing that Leonis is safe, and automatically hugs him. However, she realizes that she was severely injured, and Leonis tells her that he used sacred magic to help her. Celia, upon hearing this, does not know what he is talking about, and the protagonist realizes that humans cannot use magic. The young woman asks if it is some kind of power from a sacred sword, since she knows that the Academy of the Sacred Sword documented swords with healing powers. But Leonis plays along and tells her that he does not know much about the topic. She explains that sacred swords are a type of power that emerged to fight against the voids. When they first appeared, children with mysterious abilities started appearing everywhere, and because those abilities took the form of weapons, people began calling them sacred swords. Celia confesses that she does not know exactly how it works, but in most cases, it adopts the personality of its wielder. Leonis believes that they are souls manifesting as physical weapons. Meanwhile, Celia tells him that she has not been blessed by her sacred sword yet, and they are interrupted by Regina, who is concerned about Celia. Upon Regina's question about whether she has fought against another void, she asks the protagonist what happened. Leonis tells her that he was trembling with fear, and when he looked up, they were already gone. Later, as they leave the ruins, Regina asks Celia if she found out anything about the boy. Celia says that he was apparently abandoned, and the voids kidnapped him, causing him to suffer from amnesia. After boarding the vehicle that will take them home, Regina takes the opportunity to introduce herself to the protagonist. Seeing that Leonis is staring at her, she complains to her friend that he is too lewd for his age. While heading to the city, Regina tells the protagonist to enjoy hugging Celia until they get there. However, Celia, realizing that she is embarrassing Leonis, asks her friend to stop teasing him like that. Finally, they approach the city, and Leonis is fascinated by what the humans have built. Celia informs him that it is the last human stronghold to resist the voids, called the 7th Assault Garden. In the next scene, we move 6 years into the past to the 3rd Assault Garden. There, humans try to resist the continuous attacks of the voids, and we can also see that Celia and Regina were terrified upon hearing the cannon shots. However, Celia tries to reassure Regina, saying that her father, who clearly fights at the front and leads the army, will take care of everything. Still, Regina is very worried and tells her that she has never seen so many voids, as they even filled the sky. She replies that she knows her mother, along with her sisters and the other knights, never lost a battle. Celia promises Regina that when blessed with her sacred sword, she will join her father and the others in the battle to help. While they listen to the commotion outside, she tells Regina that next week her training will begin, but due to nervousness, Celia tells many things to Regina, diverting her attention. When both dream that everything will be fine, they hear a great bombardment. Desperate, Celia tries to help her family, and Regina stops her. With tears in her eyes, Celia tries to convince herself that her family never lost a battle. Later, someone opens the bunker doors and picks up the girls, releasing all the survivors of the fight. Upon leaving, The girls hear a man complaining about the destruction of the city and how there is not a single knight left alive. He thinks it's impossible because the 1,000 sacred knights who were fighting were the best. Meanwhile, Celia apologizes to Regina since she had promised that everything would be fine, and she was clearly wrong. The scene changes, and the protagonist asks if this place called the 7th Assault Garden is a massive fortress. Reina replies that it is, and that it is also the city where they live, a place they must clearly keep safe. Upon arriving at the 7th Assault Garden, the protagonist is fascinated by the island the humans have built. Regina corrects him, saying that it is not an island, but a megafleet. With this megafleet, they travelled across the sea to search for and destroy void colonies. The protagonist cannot believe that this construction moves, and then Celia informs the Central about the events of her investigation. She reports that they rescued a young refugee, who they will take to the dormitories, and also mentions that he possesses a sacred sword, which surprises Regina. Celia tells Regina that it was he who healed her, and perhaps due to his kind heart, a sacred sword manifested. The protagonist asks what they mean by refugee, and Regina explains that they are people who have been expelled from their homeland by the Voids. Celia informs him that searching for refugees is another mission of the Assault Garden. She reassures the protagonist not to worry about anything because now he will live with them in the Academy of the Sacred Sword. The Academy is an institution where sacred sword users train to become sacred swordsmen. They inform him that enrolling is mandatory for young people gifted with power, and with a conspiratorial look, Regina tells him that, in return, he will receive a certain level of living status. Next, Regina tells them that she has to leave because she needs to do the shopping, and Celia asks the protagonist to accompany her. Only that before, he must undergo a test that examines foreigners. Leonis responds that he can handle it on his own from here, and because of this, Celia leaves to wait for him at the exit. However, immediately after he left, Leonis headed to the bathroom, where he complains about why he ended up in this place. Since his plan was to rebuild his demonic army and bring humans to their knees, he is very upset to discover that humans have developed rapidly during his dormant time, and monsters called Voids have also appeared. This is compounded by the fact that he has a child's body. Therefore, he decides to invoke Blackus and Shari, who quickly become his servants. Upon seeing them, Leonis tells them that it has been a long time since they saw each other. Blackus agrees with him, feeling that a millennium lasted longer than he clearly thought. He then asks about his appearance. Leonis replies that the reincarnation ritual did not work as expected. He was brought back to life in his old human form. However, Shari interrupts and confesses that his new appearance is very adorable. Upon hearing her, Leonis gets upset, thinking that she is mocking him. That's why Shari apologizes. Later, Leonis tells them that they are on an artificial island created by humans, which they use as a fortress. Upon discovering that this is the 7th, he believes there are 6 other islands of similar scale nearby. Shari questions whether they can build something like that, since they have always been weak compared to elves. The protagonist replies that it is no longer the case, because the world is now drastically different from what they had imagined. For this reason, he needs them to investigate the current military strength of humanity before rebuilding his army. However, he warns them that magic seems almost extinct, and using spells will attract attention. They agree to follow his orders, and Shari asks him what he plans to do. The protagonist replies that he will infiltrate the human military education facilities since, as annoying as it is, he needs food, clothing, and shelter to survive with his current body. Shari complains that he is going to be helped by humans, as she wanted to take care of him in his new adorable form. Then we see the protagonist heading to the door Celia indicated. Leonis enters the place and is scared by the first test they give him. Still, he continues his path, where they perform different tests on him and detect large amounts of mana, so he must use a spell to suppress that mana and reach the end. Now at the end, upon receiving his identification, Leonis meets Celia, who was clearly anxious waiting for him. She takes his identification and takes a photograph to schedule his consultation about the sacred sword. When someone enrolls in the academy, they have to register the properties of their sacred sword. Once that is done, they will receive an official student card, Leonis. Upon hearing what he knows how to do, he thinks that he will have to improvise and deceive them when they investigate the properties of his sword. Later, Celia tells him that she will give him a tour of the city before they go to the dormitories. During his tour, Leonis observes that everyone is very calm, so he asks Celia about it, as she mentioned earlier that this was the front line. Celia says they are calm because the sacred swordsmen are the ones sent to the front. However, the 7th Assault Garden has always prevented the direct invasion of any void. They arrive in front of the central command tower, which is the cornerstone of the city. Celia tells him that military matters are handled here, and it is also the administrative headquarters. Leonis sees that the tower, despite not showing amazement outwardly, is larger than Death Hall's tower. Subsequently, Celia takes him to see the conference room, where classes are held. Later, she shows him the auditorium, the library, and the research laboratory. Leonis, very surprised, asks if all these facilities make up the Sacred Sword Academy. She responds that she only showed him a small fraction, as there are many other recreational places, not to mention the dormitories and the huge bathhouse next to them. Leonis asks about the purpose of the ballroom and bathhouse, and Celia explains that they are for uplifting the sacred swordsmen, as their sacred swords are born from the heart, and this means they can't unleash their full power if they feel disheartened. Leonis, understanding this is not a conventional military education center, continues the tour, and they reach the training field. Celia informs him that he should attend the Sacred Sword consultation there tomorrow. Suddenly, Celia falls to her knees, feeling unwell, and Leonis expresses concern. As the young girl falls, she sees other members training. She thinks that after taking a break, she has to train more, as she is determined to do whatever it takes to obtain her sacred sword as soon as possible. In the following scene, as they head to the dormitories, Leonis thinks about what she said. The protagonist confesses at some point that he found it strange that this girl, without a sacred sword, enrolled in a military academy. Later, Celia stops very upset upon seeing Musel Road approaching. Musel notices she is injured. Maliciously, he asks if she volunteered for a research mission for which she is not fit, and that's why she got into trouble. Celia is greatly upset upon hearing this and asks Leonis to leave clearly. However, when they try, Musel stops them to ask the girl about the boy beside her. She responds that it's none of his business, provoking Musel. He starts laughing, telling her that it seems she didn't get enough playing platoon with all her marginalized classmates. That's why she decided to take care of a child now. Celia responds that the boy Musel is clearly mocking is a sacred swordsman. Musel, upon hearing this, he asks him to stop joking, but Leonis, on his part, seeing that he is treated as an inferior being, thinks that for now, it's normal. Therefore, he considers overlooking this small lack of respect, since he cannot attract attention. Later, we see that Musel asks Celia to join his squad, which is close to the top of the hierarchy. This way, she won't have to worry about being expelled from the academy, even though she is a loser who cannot manifest a sacred sword, despite having it in her blood. Musel tells her to just say yes to join his collection of toys while showing his girls, but Celia refuses and then takes Leonis to leave, ignoring Musel, who becomes furious and grabs Celia's hair, prompting Leonis to intervene. Leonis uses a spell to terrify Musel, clearly using only his gaze, and forces him to kneel before him. When he approaches, pretending to be concerned, he whispers in his ear that he will make sure he never lays a finger on Celia again. Musel, not content with that, threatens Leonis with activating his sacred sword, but they are interrupted by a young woman named Fine. She informs Musel that what he is doing is completely prohibited. Fine tells Musel that he is in the women's dormitory area and threatens him, saying that if he doesn't leave immediately, she will send the images of the incident to the administration office. Finally, Musel, very upset, agrees to leave. And Leonis, seeing that Musel is clearly leaving, complains about letting himself be provoked by him. Later, Fine apologizes to Celia for having to endure Musel's foolishness. Subsequently, she approaches Leonis and introduces herself as Fine, a member of Celia's squad and a data analyst. Meanwhile, Leonis observes with amazement her type of sacred sword, which apparently has infinite forms and abilities. Fine apologizes to Celia for not accompanying her on the mission today, as she had to process data from the administration. She tells Celia that she discovered the sensors detected a strange magical reaction in the area. However, despite removing all the noise, she has not been able to figure out what it is. Therefore, she heard that they are sending an elite investigation team to gather more data on this sound. But suddenly, Celia, who was listening attentively, begins to feel unwell and almost falls again. Later, we see Leonis arriving with Celia at the dormitory, and he is surprised to see that it looks older compared to all the others he had seen. She explains that accommodations are assigned based on the squad's achievements, as the academy operates under a merit-based system. Therefore, squads with a higher rank have newer dormitories. Later, Celia shows him the dormitory of her teammates, and when looking for Regina, they discover that she is already asleep, maybe because she spent a lot of energy before. They finally arrive at Celia's dormitory. Leonis asks her if there really is no problem with his presence here. Celia responds that no, as he is just a child. She then tells him that he should first bathe before going to the dining room. So, Leonis asks where the bathroom is, so he can go ahead. While he prepares to bathe, Celia asks him if he would like to join her squad after his exam, but since he doesn't respond quickly, she tells him to barter calmly, as they can talk about all that later. Now we see that Leonis tries to bathe, and when doing so, he can't believe the level of technology that exists here. However, he is suddenly interrupted by Celia's presence. Celia scolds him for washing his hair with soap, and despite Leonis's embarrassment, Celia offers to bathe him. Then she reminds him of his question. Celia also indicates that his power is very valuable, so high-ranking squads may ask him to join. She confesses that she would understand if he didn't want to join this squad, since she knows she hasn't been able to awaken his sacred sword yet. But if he still decides to do so, she says she would be delighted to receive him. Before he answers, he asks her why she has the impulse to expose himself to dangers on the battlefield when she doesn't have a sacred sword. He believes that it would be best for him to find someone to protect her. Celia responds angrily, refusing to be protected because she only wants to fight. She then faints, and Leonis uses his spells to help her. Upon waking up, she bites Leonis's neck, and when she doesn't understand why, he confesses that he lied when he said she was cured with his sacred sword. He doesn't have the power to revive a life, so Rizal Ray Crystallia is already dead. Now we move 2 years into the past, where we see Celia training hard before the eyes of Regina. Suddenly, Musil and his group interrupt the training, insisting that she can join his squad even without a sacred sword. She refuses, but as he insists, Regina intervenes, using her weapon to prevent Musil from touching Celia. After successfully scaring him away, Regina tells Celia that when she awakens her sacred sword, she can finish him quickly. However, Celia responds that this is not the reason she wants the sacred sword, and wonders if she will ever be able to obtain it. The scene changes, and we return to the present, where Leonis observes Celia, who has not yet recovered her strength. Finally, she wakes up and asks Leonis what happened because she remembers they were in the bathroom. Leonis tells her that he used magic to carry her to bed and confesses that he shouldn't have touched or looked at her. However, she stares at him and asks who he really is, to which Leonis responds that he is the reincarnation of an ancient sorcerer. He recounts that in his time, magic was a skill that people harnessed for themselves. He then reveals that this is how she was revived as one of his relatives. Celia asks if it was with a sacred sword, and he responds that it was a level 10 spell called Create Elder Undead. However, he admits that it was a risky bet, but considering the results, everything turned out better than expected. So now, she is the most prestigious type of undead, a vampire queen. He informs her that her state of weakness was due to insufficient mana, so to recover, she sought the blood from his neck, a natural and necessary response to replenish mana. Celia is surprised and tells Leonis that he did not lie when he said that she was already dead. As she sits up, she asks if she can talk about herself, to which Leonis agrees. Celia then shares that when she was 9 years old, her city was attacked by a void outbreak called the Stampede. Since everyone in her family was a sacred sword swordsman, they fought to protect the city until they died. As she and Regina survived in the Sacred Sword Academy shelter, Celia took charge of their custody, thinking it made sense as she carried in her blood the legacy of being sacred sword swordsman. But she also believed that fighting against the void could accelerate her sacred sword awakening process. However, it didn't work as expected. She then asks Leonis if, since she's not alive, she can be blessed with a sacred sword. Leonis responds that he doesn't know, but what he does know is that she will now be much stronger than before. Next, they are interrupted by the growling of Leonis's stomach due to his extreme hunger. Celia dresses up and takes him to the dining room, where she asks Leonis if she can still eat food. Leonis tells her that he is the most elite vampire species, so she can eat, but his digestive system won't be very efficient in converting the food into mana. She understands, and now asks what Leonis plans to eat. Leonis responds that maybe a pastry, as he is not very familiar with this menu, but Celia scolds him, saying that it is not enough for nutrition. Leonis tells her that he doesn't want to hear that word coming from an undead. Celia, upon hearing this, becomes sad making Leonis think that he became undead voluntarily and had Roselia to guide him. Later, Celia offers to choose his food, and Leonis agrees with the condition that he will pay for it. Then he shows a coin to the young girl who does not know what that object is. Leonis tells her that it is a gold raider coin with which he could buy everything in this restaurant. However, she informs him that she cannot use it, since this place only accepts credit as a form of payment. Leonis complains that although he cannot use it as currency, he thinks gold should be considered precious, and Celia tells him that it is not because chemically forged silver is much more valuable now. Due to her words, Leonis, worried, thinks that all the gold coins he saved are now useless. In the next scene, a young woman is harassed by two men who try to extort money from her, but she gives them a beating and tells them to return the next week. Then, Celia approaches Sayuka to see if she is okay. Sayuka explains that they were casino thugs she had dealt with the previous day, and they came to collect. She apologizes for not accompanying her on the mission and confesses that she went out at night after her classes to get rich, but ended up bankrupt. Suddenly, she sees Leonis's coin, which clearly seems like a nice trinket to her. Later, she presents Leonis to Sayuka Sied Glinda, the vanguard attacker of the squad, who, despite being a novice, has managed to kill several voids on her own. Later, the scene shifts to the students having lunch, and Celia informs them that today's meal is on her. While they eat, Leonis notices Sayuka's uniform and asks why it's different. Sayuka explains that it's the traditional attire of Uran, her homeland, and a memento from her older sister. She is addressed as both Sakuya and Sayuka, and despite this, we will call her by either of the two names. Sayuka asks Leonis to come back next week. Due to this, Celia gets frustrated that Sayuka only bets and skips exams. In the next scene, Degley Salto introduces herself to Leonis as the one in charge of his consultation. She asks him not to be nervous, as she only needs to determine what type of sacred sword he possesses. Leonis summons his malevolent sin staff, believing its supportability depends on the situation, making it versatile. Degley suggests changing the simulation type to test his weapon, but before doing so, Leonis destroys the entire row of Metak Kalum Void Simulator. Degley is left speechless. Concerned, Leonis explains that he tried to lower his power to the minimum, but failed. Degley accuses him of lying about being a support type and demands an explanation. Trying not to draw attention, Leonis claims it was just a lucky shot. However, she remains suspicious, and as other students gather to see what happened, Degley considers preparing another alternative simulation. But suddenly, Musil interrupts and asks her to let him fight in combat against Leonis, as he can take care of his consultation being a first-class sacred swordsman. Leonis mocks him, saying it's fine since he will be the substitute for a bunch of useless garbage. In response to his insult, Musil activates his sacred sword, along with his entire group. Celia, upon seeing this, complains that it's unfair for them to fight 4 against 1. However, he justifies it by saying that this is the total control ability of his sacred sword, so the girls are part of his weapon. Because of this, Leonis asks Degley if he should defeat all of them to complete his consultation. She responds that it's indeed the case, only if Musil conducts his examination. However, Celia interrupts them and says that as Leonis' tutor, she will fight by his side. Musil agrees with the condition that if she loses, she must join her squad. And despite her reluctance, Leonis automatically accepts the proposal. He adds the condition that if he loses, Musil must stop bothering Celia, which Musil agrees to. In the next scene, everyone is ready for combat. As the battle begins, Celia demonstrates great power, surprising Musil and Leonis, who believes she possesses this ability, not only because she became a vampire. Later, Musil sends one of his girls after Leonis, prompting him to ensure Musil doesn't go too far. Leonis invokes the spirits of the Shadow Realm to protect himself from Musel's rays, and then uses his spell to defeat the girl, surprising Musil. Celia scolds Musil for using the girls as shields, causing everyone to call him a coward. After defeating the girls, Celia approaches Musil, and when she tries to attack him, Musil uses his sacred sword to stop her with a move called Force. He then approaches Celia, suggesting he could lift her clothes using his wand. Musil complains that, before doing that, he must first deal with the Brett. Now, Leonis sees how he must fight alone alone against all of them, thinking they lack experience despite their potential. Before attacking, he hears Celia repeating that she must protect him, which awakens her sacred sword, helping her escape Musel's total control. She launches towards him, even cutting his sacred sword, which frees the rest of the girls from his total control. Celia stands in front of Musel, who is on his knees, and asks him what he plans to do now. Musel, completely humiliated before everyone, admits defeat, bringing joy to everyone present. In the next scene, we can see how Celia thanks Leonis for helping her, and he tells her that it's not necessary since he is part of her family. She asks what this means, and Leonis tells her that a family exists to protect its master, making Celia very happy. She promises to protect him from now on, but, in return, asks him to make her stronger. He accepts the deal. Later, a party is held in honor of Celia's sacred sword awakening, and Leonis joining the squad. There, Celia's friends ask her what type of sacred sword Celia has awakened. She tells them it's a light sword with a sharp blade. Sakuya suggests calling it the Beheader, but Regina suggests other names. Before they start fighting, Celia says that they haven't seen its true potential yet, so she wants to name it after becoming familiar with its usage. Later, Fine asks Leonis to visit her room to upload his data to the Academy's network. Sakuya takes the opportunity to ask where he will sleep, since all the extra rooms in the house are used as storage. Due to this, Regina offers Leonis to sleep together, promising to give him homemade sweets every day. Sakuya says that he can also sleep in her room, since she is almost never at home. On her part, Fiend suggests that if he stays with her, she will help him with his studies. However, Celia interrupts and informs them that she believes Leonis should sleep in her room. Her friends ask for the reasons, clearly making her nervous and leaving her speechless. However, Leonis tells them that Celia was the one who found him, and for some reason, he feels comfortable in her room. After hearing his words, the rest of the girls agree to let Leonis sleep in Celia's room. Later, Leonis goes to Fine's room and asks about the function of her sacred sword. She tells him that its main functions are data acquisition, analysis, and transmission, but previously, she was an attacker in another squad. However, 2 friends died during a mission, and her sacred sword lost its abilities. Celia invited her to join their group, and now she handles data. After finishing the registration, Fine makes a joke about Leonis always looking at chests, embarrassing him, who then sees that she has a map, and seeing this, clearly catches the attention of Fine. She presents a tablet for he to continue snooping, and then Leonis tries to use the tablet, which seems quite easy for him. While reviewing the map, he sees the area where Det Hall clearly was, and the places where his army fought battles. In doing so, he discovers that there is a relationship between the void outbreaks and the locations of the ancient battle. Therefore, he summons Blackus to find out everything he can discover so far. Blackus tells him something disturbing. The floating island has an underground core equipped with an enormous mana crystal, what humans call an energy center. Upon hearing this, Leonis recalls that Goblin Lord Dissolve used mana crystals to power his castle, and this might be the same, but Blackus informs him that it is of an enormous size and equipped with complex electrical circuits. Leonis believes that its technology is remarkable and would be a valuable asset if he could get his hands on it. Blackus thinks it's a great idea, so he bids farewell to continue his investigation. Later, Shari returns to her room, and before reporting on the mission, gives Leonis a donut. He tries it and admits that it's very delicious. Shari reveals that she got more sweet things, but Leonis stops her and asks what she has been doing all this time. Shari informs him that nobody in the city knows about him, and there isn't even information about the war that happened 1,000 years ago. Leonis finds it strange that the war has been forgotten so quickly. Then he receives Shari's complaint about turning Celia into his family. Leonis suggests that she is a vampire queen she can train to become his right hand, but Shari gets even more upset and confesses that she now hates him. However, she has to leave suddenly because Celia approached to inform Leonis that he can go take a bath. In the next scene, elite investigators search for information about a possible Void's outbreak, and just when they believe there is nothing, they encounter Archael, the great sage, who attacks them after mentioning the protagonist. Now we see how Leonis is conversing with a man who complains about problems in the quarry due to understaffing. Additionally, a gargoyle has arrived, terrorizing everyone. However, he thanks Leonis for coming to their rescue. Still, Leonis informs him that the crown has ordered him to monitor the entire region, just fulfilling his duty. Upon hearing this, the man praises Leonis for being an honorable person who came all the way here while the other 6 heroes protect the capital. He confesses to being happy that Leonis came to the middle of nowhere to kill the monsters troubling them. Leonis responds that it doesn't matter, as those monsters are also his cherished opponents. He confesses to thinking about capturing and training one, finding it exciting. However, the man cautions him against joking, reminding him that he is the powerful hero who defeated the sun-balled Demon King. Finally, both reach the quarry, and Leonis inquires about the gargoyle. When he turns around, the man has already left, revealing it was a trap in which they took advantage to clearly capture him. Next, we see how some soldiers prepare to kill him using their spears to pierce his entire body. And after doing so, the captain orders them to bring him down to check that he is already dead. The captain sees that he is dead and tells the rest that now they don't have to worry anymore that he is a threat to their master, and one of the warriors thinks that all the respect Leonis earned from the crown and the people was entirely useless. The man who led him to the trap adds that Leonis was already spouting absurd nonsense about taming monsters, making him a lost cause. However, his companion responds that perhaps if he had shown a desire for money or status, maybe he would have reached an agreement. Subsequently, we see Leonis dead, and a goddess comments that it's a shame because he might have known it was a trap. She believes that despite everything, he is the savior of the world and was still murdered by those in power. So, she asks if he doesn't hate them for betraying him. To which he responds that no, as that doesn't mean they are evil. The goddess says she understands his point, and then asks if he thinks the world is fair. Leonis replies that it doesn't matter because, in the end, the world is what it is. Upon hearing this, she confesses that she wants to rebel against this world and offers him to join her since he is the only one she can trust for this task. She had been observing him before, thinking that heroes are boring, but she likes him and wants him to be hers. Thus, Leonis regains his life after accepting the goddess's proposal. The scene changes, and we see the protagonist waking up, thinking about finding Roselia, whom he clearly dreamed of. He believes she can restore the ancient glory of her army of demon kings, and reveals that this was his first mission after having been revered for 1,000 years. Suddenly, he realizes something is on his neck and wakes up Celia. Upon waking up, she is frightened as if a bucket of cold water had been thrown on her. The protagonist reveals that he has a mark on his hand that detonates his authority, serving as a counterpart to his submission mark, which he can use to command his subjects obediently. Celia, upon hearing this, asks him if he was the one who woke her up. She then questions him, asking if now she has to do everything he says. Leonil replies that yes, and then Celia asks if that includes perverted things, but he assures her that he would never do anything like that. She is reassured and tells him that she trusts his words, because when they were in the bathroom, he behaved like a real gentleman. The protagonist tells her that he would like her to behave like a lady, and then he shows her how he discovered that she drank his blood while sleeping. She is embarrassed and confesses that it was just a little, because she couldn't wait. Leonil tells her that, as his familiar, he doesn't mind, and he understands that controlling her bloodlust is difficult. However, he asks her to at least let him know next time. Celia agrees and repeats her apologies. Suddenly, they are interrupted by a call from Fine, who informs Celia that they summoned a strategy meeting a while ago. Celia is a bit puzzled because it's her day off and it's very early. Fine responds that, despite not knowing what it's about, it might be related to the research team since she found out that the research results from the database haven't been uploaded yet. Therefore, this early morning meeting cannot be a coincidence. Fine promises to let Celia know as soon as possible if she learns anything. Celia finishes talking to the protagonist and asks if something happened. She replies that yes, but she thinks everything will be fine. She mentions that the most important thing is that they have no classes today, so she asks him to help her get in shape. Leonil laughs at her because it seems she had a good time last night and is now full of energy. However, his words embarrass Celia, who asks him not to phrase it that way. Meanwhile, at the Central, they are worried because communication with Squad 13 ceased 11 hours ago near the 4th area. They wonder if they are dead and complain that something always happens when the commander is absent. They are informed that the last data received was about the activity of a void that disappeared after 3 seconds. One of the high-ranking members finds this unusual as it disappeared very quickly, questioning if the sensors might be malfunctioning. They reply that the changes in spatial mass and mana wave characteristics seem to have been well measured. They also mention that there are images of what happened, and upon seeing them, they believe it might be roots of a tree, but there is no information on this type of vegetation in the libraries. They conclude that it might be a new void species, or a mutated void, or even a void lord. One member is particularly interested in the void lord possibility and asks if there is any evidence. The response is negative, as it is just a conjecture. They compare it to a stampede, reminding everyone of the tragedy 6 years ago when the third assault garden was attacked. Another member suggests that, due to this incident, they have significantly improved the defensive capabilities of the place and prioritized training sacred swordsmen. The representative of civilians mentions that they are used to regular exercises and they could evacuate the refuge calmly even during an emergency. The councillor responds that among the semi-human pavilion, there are dissidents who disdain the Empire's dominion. He then questions if they are sure that they won't attempt to induce panic. The councillor asks everyone if they won't relocate the city prematurely if there is a risk of a stampede. Due to this, a woman remarks that the power of the Central remains stable around 90%, so she believes it would be feasible to withdraw at a speed of 30 knots. However, the general disagrees with fleeing, since the marine abilities of an assault garden are not designed for such situations. Suddenly, they are interrupted by a call informing them that the commander has already made a decision. The commander, knowing that void activities are currently not present, believes it is hasty to relocate the city. However, he has ordered an immediate follow-up investigation. Later, upon hearing this, the general suggests gathering a reconnaissance squad formed by the best squads in the city, as they would be quite capable of eliminating a small void horde. A woman informs them that she has assigned the objective of Resignation Code UK 6402 and is entering the details into the Imperial Capital database. Later, we see Celia training how to use her sacred sword. Observing her, the protagonist thinks she is doing very well and asks if she took classes with an instructor. She replies that she learned everything from her family when she was young, considering herself self-taught since arriving at the academy. She clarifies that she cannot compare herself to someone like Sakuya, who is a true swordmaster. Upon hearing this, Leonis reveals that the true potential lies in the mana supply of a vampire queen. Therefore, he promises to teach her magic in a few days, considering it the best course of action to leverage her sword skills and strengthen her physical abilities, turning her into a swordswoman sorceress. Celia agrees to train in this manner, so the protagonist shows that he has prepared more capable opponents. Subsequently, Leonis summons the intrepid soldiers of the underworld, surprising Celia when she sees that they are skeletons. The protagonist explains that they are lower-ranked subordinates and indicates that she can use her full strength against them. Celia follows his instructions, defeating them all. However, Leonis informs her that more opponents will come, and Celia will face them as well. After the exhausting battle, the protagonist thinks it's enough and offers to replenish her mana supply, but Celia declines, saying she's fine. Upon hearing this, Leonis congratulates her for learning to handle her new power and confesses that he loves seeing how his subordinates improve and become stronger. Hearing this, Celia tells him as a thank you gesture she will invite him to eat since she knows a restaurant outside the campus. However, the protagonist refuses, thinking he can't keep asking her to spend money all the time. Suddenly, his stomach growls loudly due to hunger, embarrassing him. The scene shifts, and it becomes clear that Alpha Company was sent to the location of the UK 6402 objective to begin the investigation. Sakuya is happy, because she finally won at the casino, but notices a black wolf that catches her attention due to its beautiful fur and noble aura. She names it Fluffy Black Coat, and ties a green scarf around its neck with some food. Meanwhile, Regina visits Fine in her room to make her try the luxurious dishes she just cooked. Regina reveals that she wanted to impress the protagonist with these gourmet treats on her day off. Suddenly, Sakuya enters the room and shares that she encountered a beautiful dog in front of the residence. She names the dog and mentions that they are now friends. Sakuya plans to introduce the dog to everyone later. However, her attention is drawn to what Regina prepared. After Regina lets Sakuya taste the food, Sakuya expresses gratitude as she hadn't eaten anything since the previous night. Regina then asks Fine about her reason for wearing the school uniform on her day off. Fine explains that she needs to be prepared as she was assigned to gather and analyze information. Sakuya informs them that a reconnaissance squad was sent from the Central to the location, where the first squad disappeared. She then asks if Fine knows where Celia is, And Fine responds that Celia is likely doing her usual activities on her days off. In the next scene, Celia takes the protagonist on her motorcycle to the restaurant she mentioned. Meanwhile, Shari is determined to work hard and earn money to buy sweets for the protagonist. She is tasked with preparing everything to cook French fries, but when they suggest using a specific knife, she finds it dull and decides to use her own. To everyone's surprise, she skillfully cuts even the plate with her knife, leaving the manager astounded. Nervously, he asks Shari to go sweep the sidewalk across the street. Shari is hesitant about going outside, but notices the protagonist with Celia. She becomes upset seeing Celia making the demon lord carry donuts and complains that Leonise is too indulgent with his subordinates. As they leave, Shari wonders where they are headed. Finally, Leonis and Celia arrive at the restaurant where the protagonist doesn't understand what's happening upon seeing some children calling Celia sister. She explains that this place is a restaurant and also the home for the children who call it their own. She reveals that she has been working here for some time. Celia asks the protagonist to be kind, as some of the children are around his age. Seeing them, the protagonist thinks that they are orphans like him, triggering memories of his own past. Suddenly, a child interrupts him, asking if he is a friend of Sister Celia. Leonis is unsure how to respond. They enter the restaurant where the children confess to Celia about a little incident while she was busy studying for her exams. Suddenly, a child lifts her skirt, prompting Leonis to consider intervening. However, Celia stops him, explaining that it doesn't bother her because the child is very young. The owner of the place, Perina, scolds Dean for his actions towards Celia. Celia introduces Leonis to Perina, and as she recounts how she found him, the children become automatically interested in Leonise. Subsequently, Celia informs Perina that she brought vegetables and donuts she purchased along the way, which brings joy to the children. They request Celia to be the cook for the day, and she happily agrees. Observing the unfolding events, Leonis understands the significance of this place, which Retelia wants to protect. Recollecting his own castle and its protective role, he laments not having such a place anymore. The scene shifts, and the group of investigators arrives at the site of the incident, finding nothing initially. However, Fine suddenly discovers vibrations under the outer edge of the city. Meanwhile, Sakuya, awakened from her nap, senses the vibrations and feels strange. Simultaneously, two employees heading to check food reserves discover the area covered in roots. While Leonise is enjoying a meal with Celia and the children in the restaurant, the narrative transitions to the year 428 in the Logun Kingdom. Ogres attack a border city, causing significant damage. From the city's walls, Leonis, Tearis Resurrectia, and Araquel de Gradios observe the situation. Tearis and Araquel decide not to wait for Sardar and take action to eliminate the monsters within the walls. Araquel communicates with the sky to request the resurrection of the inhabitants. He also begins to amplify the power of the sun to burn the monsters. Although this measure also causes suffering to the people, he explains to his companions that it is necessary to end the lives of everyone, as they will be revived afterward. However, Leonis interrupts Araquel's spell and directly charges at the monsters, considering it will be less complicated than following Araquel's plan. Finally, Leonis manages to defeat all the monsters one by one, earning the applause of the people. However, instead of being delighted, Araquel, upon witnessing his feat, thinks that due to his power, it will only make them target his head. The scene changes, and we return to the present where Archael, the great sage, is touring the 7th Assault Garden, and meanwhile, the high-ranking officials of the city observe with dismay as the void they were monitoring has disappeared once again. Then they are informed that a user with a sacred sword from Platoon 18 has requested permission to present the results of their analysis. Upon hearing this, the advisor remarks that they are just a student, as their platoon is only 2 digits. However, they are told that it is the youngest daughter of the Pileth family who excels in analyses, so the vice commander grants permission for her to present her analyses. Fine informs them that she detected vibrations in the underground of District 62 at 11:03, and simultaneously there was a magical energy reaction. After separating the data from the noise, she was able to clarify the magical wave's origin. Fine explains that, after analyzing changes in space characteristics and disturbances in the area, she believes the void can cause damage while moving. She also mentions that, later, at 11:14, she detected a similar disturbance 2 blocks away in District 59. With this data, she concludes that there is a void attempting to infiltrate from underground. Fine's words unsettled everyone in the high command as they found it hard to believe the situation. However, their analysts confirm what Fine told them. They express their belief that the cause is in Maintenance Corridor 29, which surprises everyone. They question why the detection device didn't react, and Fine explains that the vibrations were too subtle, leading the device to consider it a normal accident. The General, thinking it's UK 64402, inquires about its location. The female analyst responds, mentioning the floating cluster module and its anchoring framework for infiltration. An alarm sounds, signifying a security breach in District 31. The annoyed councillor questions why magical energy wasn't detected. Fine suggests that the void might have limited its power to infiltrate secretly, but the councillor doubts this. Fine then asks if they found void crystal residues, but there's no clear answer. As the alarm rings again, a report from the inventory control section reveals that in storage room 2 and 26, they found a live plant with roots. Throughout this, Regina is attempting to contact Celia to inform her about what's happening, but she can't reach her. Fine then asks her the name of the place Celia went to, and she responds that it's the Sunny Point house. Upon receiving this information, Fine says she can locate them. Regina, worried, asks if it's true that the void infiltrated, and she confirms it, expressing hope that there aren't many. The scene changes, and we see Shari's boss desperate due to the accumulated work, and he can't find her. Later, we move to Sunny Point House, where Leonis approves of the radish soup. Leonis thinks it has a normal taste, with the only notable aspect being how easy it is to digest. Suddenly, Diane interrupts and asks him to draw his sacred sword. Leonis observes, feeling annoyed, thinking the boy has guts. Subsequently, another girl named Chichela intervenes. Upon witnessing what Diane did, she scolds him for making Leonis uncomfortable. Then, in a friendly manner, she hands something to Leonis that he can use in his meal. Leonis, noticing her politeness, compliments her, causing her to blush with embarrassment. Following this, the high-ranking officials continue grappling with the void issue. The General reports finding remnants of UK 6402 in the maintenance corridor. Subsequently, Alpha 1 team sends the video of their arrival at Warehouse 226, and while awaiting attack orders, they witness eyes emerging on the routes, attacking them. The General, observing the situation, thinks the voids have finally decided to reveal themselves, while also questioning why it appeared in the warehouse. Meanwhile, the councillor wonders why the city's underground defences are so weak compared to the aerial defences. The representative of the civilians asks if it's not a good time to issue an evacuation order, and then we see the vice commander desperate because he can't communicate with the imperial capital. An analyst informs him that the damages caused the communication cuts. The representative of the civilians prepares to report on the situation to the council, so they can start preparing now. Following this, we can observe how communication with the reinforcement squadron has been re-established. They report to the central command that they couldn't eliminate the void as it escaped. This situation generates uncertainty, as it should be attacking. However, analysts speculate that it might be conserving energy, which is why it remains vigilant over the energy supply channel. Upon hearing this, Fine informs them that the energy supply channel is blocked. However, if they closely observe the void's movements, given that it has been clearly detected, they can determine its destination. The Vice Commander thinks that the void is heading towards the magic furnace. Fine mentions that if the UK Azo4 Azo2 is a Void Lord, it can summon a stampede by obtaining the energy from the magic furnace. Everyone becomes concerned, prompting the Vice Commander to order the protection of the magic furnace. However, the Commander responds, stating that they already have a robust defense system in place. The scene changes and we see how the UK ZO402 reaches the magic furnace by passing through the walls. Despite the combined defense system and soldiers' efforts, they fail to stop it. The Councillor informs the Vice Commander that, as they cannot contact the capital, he will now assume the role of the commander. He immediately orders the 7th Assault Garden to enter defensive fortress mode. The commander instructs them to evacuate civilians to the bunkers and prepare for a stampede. On another note, we see that the protagonist is being harassed by the children, who ask him to draw a sacred sword. As he doesn't do it, Celia requests him if he could please show them. Leonis decides that if they want to see something, he will show them something more interesting. The protagonist shows his skeleton subordinates performing acrobatics, which clearly scares some of the children. The scene changes, and we can finally see that the Void Lord has reached the center of the magic furnace. Meanwhile, the protagonist and Celia are surprised to see that the city has changed its mode, and they also witness the arrival of the Void Stampede, which clearly saddens Celia. And next, we see how the city focuses on attacking the deployment of the Voids with automated turrets. However, due to UK 6402 reaching the magic furnace, the magical energy reserves of each district have been depleted. Upon witnessing the situation, the councillor informs the rest that reinforcements from the capital will take at least 3 days to arrive. Therefore, he asks the new commander if they can survive. The director of the Sacred Swords assures them that her students won't fall easily in 3 days. In the following scene, Celia's companions are waiting for her in the centre of the district, where she should come for refuge. However, Fine tells her friends that they should also focus on the enemy in front of them. We observe how the turrets of the central building eliminate a large number of voids. On the other hand, the girls activate their sacred swords and confront the approaching voids. Meanwhile, Leonis looks at the monsters and reflects on the strength of humanity's enemies. However, he is interrupted by Celia, worried about not being able to communicate with the academy. At this moment, the protagonist suggests that they should take people to the Sunny Point house for shelter. When Leonis is about to offer his help, he is stopped by Shari, who asks him what he plans to do. Leonis tells her that she has come at a perfect time, which clearly seems strange to her. However, Shari assures him that she wasn't following him out of curiosity about his new familiar. Upon hearing this, the protagonist scolds her for harassing his master. She insists that it was all a coincidence, and due to this, Leonis tells her that it doesn't matter now because he has to protect his familiar's friends. Shari complains upon hearing this, since she intended to protect him. The protagonist looks at her angrily, urging her to hurry. Suddenly, the protagonist hears Celia's call, informing the children that she will take them to the shelter. Before leaving, Leonis tells her that it's dangerous outside. Celia, realizing the truth, asks the children to stay in the house. In the meantime, she and the protagonist prepare to defeat the nearby voids. When Celia activates her sacred sword, the protagonist observes, thinking that she hasn't reached her full potential yet. He asks her if she doesn't feel fear, to which she responds affirmatively. However, seeing her friends trapped, she knows she must take action now. Leonis, upon hearing her determined response, believes he can't let her die and invokes his staff. He then demonstrates part of his power by easily defeating 2 voids simultaneously. Celia is surprised by the protagonist's immense power and asks he to stay alert as more enemies are approaching. Observing the situation, Leonis reveals that this brings back old memories. In the following scene, the girls find themselves facing 3 ogres, with Sakuya easily handling them. Simultaneously, Regina employs her sacred sword to shoot down all void flyers. Subsequently, Fine informs them that all voids within a 300-meter range have been eradicated. However, their relief is short-lived as they suddenly spot a void hydra emerging in the distance within the city, instilling clear fear. The narrative then shifts to Leonis, captivated by the transformation of even the dragons into voids. He contemplates that if their magical energy resembles that of a typical dragon, conventional spells won't prove effective. Shortly afterward, they witness 3 ogres approaching. He instructs Celia that he will use a powerful technique, but to achieve it, he needs her to protect him for a moment. Celia begins attacking nearby enemies, while he starts casting his destructive 10th level magic to eliminate the dragon. Concerned about potential harm, Celia is instructed by Leonis not to move, assuring her safety. However, his failure to defeat the dragon results in a near miss, with the dragon almost setting Celia ablaze. Leonis attributes his inability to the constraints of his current form. Just as the situation becomes critical, Blackus intervenes to distract the dragon. Leonis seizes this opportunity, summoning the demon star to attack the dragon once more with his 10th level magic. Ultimately, Leonis succeeds in ending the dragon's life, leaving Celia thoroughly astounded. Abruptly, Araquel's roots ensnare Celia, and a figure distinctly reveals itself to Leonis. In the subsequent scene, we transition to the year 434 of the Holy God's calendar in the city of death known as Necrosa, where Leonis' army advances towards the fortress. Meanwhile, in the castle, Roselia welcomes Leonis, who recounts his near-death experiences in recent battles. However, being the undead demon king, he emerged victorious. He presents all the plundered loot from the enemy base as an offering to Roselia. She accepts the gift and requests him to be someone who safeguards it for the time being. Leonis employs his magic to conceal the treasure, revealing that he acquired potent magic and a new companion. He discloses that his companion is the Shadow Kingdom's prince, named Blackus, whom he taught magic in case of the realm, needs protection from the shadows. Roselia shows acceptance to Leonis, stating that everything he did is fine. She then expresses a desire to give him a gift for his victory. Subsequently, she presents him the hero's sacred sword, which clearly surprises Leonis. However, she mentions that this type of sword doesn't suit his new title, so she transforms the weapon into a cursed sword. She reveals that, to use it, Leonis must meet certain requirements, which he should already be aware of. According to Roselia, this sword tests his sincerity. Leonis nods in agreement, accepting what is necessary to wield the cursed sword. In the following scene, Leonis prepares to confront Araquel, whom he didn't expect to encounter after such a long time. The protagonist is surprised to see his former companion transformed into a void, and wonders if he is the cause of what Celia calls a stampede. He then uses his staff to attack the void, making it retreat, but still fails to retrieve his friend. He checks his obedience mark to ensure she is still alive. Observing the situation, Leonis believes that Araquel is clearly inviting him to descend into his territory, so he decides to go and put an end to it. Blackus appears astonished to see his nemesis alive. Leonis responds that, even though it's true, he now has a completely different form and reveals that he seems to have become the leader of the Voids. Blackus rejoices at the news that, after 10 years, his enemy has devolved into unknown monsters. However, the protagonist changes the subject and suggests that Roselia might have also been reborn. Blackus sees the children Celia was protecting, and he signals to the protagonist that there's no need for him to go out of his way to protect them. When Leonis sees them, he senses that they look at him with fear. However, he is already accustomed to this situation, because when Leonis was human and became a hero, his power instilled fear in people's hearts. Nevertheless, he approaches them and advises the children to stay inside the inn. Chisel takes advantage of the moment to express gratitude for his protection and asks him to take charge of rescuing Celia. Leonis is surprised that the children no longer fear him and, with joy, promises to recover Celia. Using magic, Leonis protects the children's home and summons his familiar to watch over the place. As he sets out to rescue Celia, he reflects that he would be a bad demon king if he let the people dear to his family die. Blackus, on the other hand, reveals that he obtained food after allowing his neck to be caressed, and he wishes to share it with Leonis. Later, he notices Celia's contact device, through which they hear the other girls attempting to communicate with her. The scene shifts, showing Sakuya launching an attack on the Void Hydra, successfully severing one of its heads. Subsequently, Regina also attacks the Void, but Ogress attempt to ambush her from behind. So, Fine decides to call Celia, but Leonis responds telling her that Celia has been kidnapped by the Void. But Leonis assures her that he will bring her back, but first, he needs her to use her abilities to locate Celia. Fine, upon hearing that he wants to rescue her, tells Leonis that it's too hasty to go alone, that it's better to wait for another squad. However, Leonis refuses to wait, believing they won't arrive in time, so he gets angry and tells Fine to use her sacred sword to find her. Fine does so and points out that Celia is near the city's reactor, but suddenly, the Void Hydra attacks Fine. Shari appears to defend her, leaving the other girls astonished. Shari leaves, thinking that despite not getting used to the human world, it's better than working in a donut shop. The scene changes, and we can see the protagonist mounting Blackus to head quickly towards the reactor. During the journey, Blackus asks why he is now helping humans, especially when about to confront one of the 6 heroes. Leonis responds that it's worth using the sacred sword of Fine, and besides, Regina is the servant of his relative. Upon hearing this, Blackus tells him that it's a very reasonable answer, and confesses that he enjoys seeing how humans try to defend themselves. The protagonist, slightly annoyed, agrees as he is also somewhat interested in humans. Finally, they both arrive at the magic reactor and are surprised to find Araquel fused with the artifact. Nevertheless, Leonis, smiling, demands that Araquel now return his family member. He then attacks him with a fire spell, which Araquel clearly withstands thanks to his immense regenerative power. Araquel tells him that he should have died 1,000 years ago, but the protagonist reveals that he never died. He willingly separated his soul. While Araquel mentions that the world has changed and that it will be reborn from the origin, accompanied by the blessings received. Leonis, intrigued, asks what he means, and Araquel tells him that the void creatures bring blessings to the world. He confesses that he was chosen to administer these blessings. Leonis is surprised to discover that Araquel deceived the church priests. On the other hand, Celia wakes up and tries to free herself, trusting that Leonis can help her. Meanwhile, Leonis, accompanied by Blackus, confronts Araquel. Blackus informs Leonis that his strength seems to be weakening. Leonis suggests that Araquel might be absorbing his mana, and they witness Araquel casting a powerful double spell. Leonis dodges the attacks, but upon counterattacking, he realizes that Araquel is absorbing his powers using the mana crystal from the reactor. Leonis reveals to Blackus that the situation is getting worse because Araquel is also using the Holy Light enchantment. Despite the risks, Leonis decides to go all out. Meanwhile, Celia fights to free herself, wanting to join the battle alongside Leonis, as she has awakened her sacred sword. Leonis and Blackus continue their battle with Araquel, performing combined attacks that Araquel easily stops. Later, Celia successfully unleashes her vampire powers, freeing herself from Araquel's grasp. Leonis finds her, and by sharing half of his blood and magic, Celia gains significant power, managing to wound Araquel severely. Both of them join forces to try to defeat their enemy, who threatens to destroy Leonis. Araquel begins casting a 10th level magic to annihilate everyone. Leonis asks Celia to protect him for a while, and Celia agrees, showcasing his skills with the sacred sword. Meanwhile, Leonis, despite warnings from Blackus, is determined to launch his attack. The scene changes to when Rosalia handed the demonic sword to Leonis, and he accepted it, acknowledging that he won't be forgiven if he removes the seal before meeting the requirements. In the present, Leonis explains that the requirement to unveil the demonic sword is to protect the kingdom. By unveiling it, he declares that the 7th Assault Garden will be his kingdom, and all the people there will be his subjects, and he vows to protect them. Meanwhile, Leonis recalls Rosalia's words about the sword destined to punish the insolent and destroy the world. Although it is a demonic sword blessed by the gods, Leonis plans to use it for vengeance and to defeat his enemies. Upon concluding his declaration, Blackus is surprised that the sword has accepted him. Araquel, frightened, asks how Leonis has that weapon, but Leonis mocks him and tells him it's too late to be afraid. Araquel responds that a sealed fate cannot be changed, to which Leonis retorts that only his hand will decide that fate. Leonis uses his ultimate technique, Ragnarok from the royal style of Log Galius, to defeat Araquel. The scene shifts, and the girls, as well as the high-ranking officials, watch in amazement as the Voids disappear. Analysts confirm that the Void Lord has vanished and the stampede has subsided. The council wonders if the Void Lord was caught in the magic reactor going mad and disappearing afterward. In the next scene, Leonis and Celia return to the surface, welcomed by their friends. Celia, overjoyed to be with everyone, shares her happiness about the well-being of Platoon 18. The next day, a sore Leonis, having released the seal and used the demonic sword, is visited by Celia, who offers him a sandwich and a crown made by the kids from the Sunny Point house as a token of gratitude. Reflecting on how he once hated humans and now protects them, Leonis believes that anyone paying homage to the Demon King deserves to be safeguarded. Suddenly, Celia, feeling quite embarrassed, asks Leonis to drink her blood, as she needs to regain all the mana she lost. Just as Leonis agrees, the other girls interrupt, and upon opening the door to the room, they find them in a compromising situation, leaving them all speechless. Regina, very nervous, asks what they are doing, and Sakuya reveals that she was just visiting and stumbled upon this. On the other hand, Fine scolds Celia, as this clearly goes against the rules of the residence. Celia, very apologetic, tries to provide the necessary explanations, stating that she was just taking care of Leonis. In the next scene, we discover that the Princess of the Kingdom is on her way to the 7th Assault Garden to express gratitude for what the swordsman did. Later, the protagonist informs us that the repairs for the damages caused by the Voids are already underway. Since the magical plant supplying magic to humans was destroyed, they replaced it with another device. This device harnesses sunlight and converts it into magic until they can repair the magical plant. Leonis confesses that even though this is now his kingdom, He regrets that there are still things he doesn't understand. To solve this, he plans to investigate more about the kingdom. For this purpose, he heads to the book vault. Upon arrival, he realizes he cannot enter without permission from the administration. Leonis argues with the spirit guarding the door, insisting on being allowed in as a student. However, he learns that he must submit a request to the administration, as they grant access based on biological data, academic performance, and credit information. Suddenly, Regina arrives from behind to cover Leonis's eyes because she wants to play with him. However, Leonis doesn't understand, and Regina explains that he should pretend not to know who is covering his eyes to enjoy the physical contact. Leonis, not comprehending, distances himself, saying that it's not true because he doesn't have to do what she says. Regina then asks Leonis what he is doing there. Leonis explains that he wants to investigate the ancient writings from where he was trapped, as he believes there might be something that could help him recover his memories. Upon hearing this, Regina feels sad because Leonis doesn't remember anything from his past. She assures him that she will help in any way she can. They approach the spirit to request permission to access the book vault, but the spirit denies them entry, stating that Leonis lacks the necessary authorization. Regina, upon hearing this, uses her powers before he finishes speaking to manipulate the spirit. Eventually, they both manage to enter the book vault. Leonis questions Regina about what she just did, but she avoids discussing the matter and asks him to keep it a secret as it could damage the artificial spirit's reputation. After hearing this, Leonis is surprised that spirits can be created artificially. He then asks Regina about what happened to the original spirit. Regina explains that the environmental spirit disappeared completely before the void invasion, and some believe it is in an ancient forest. However, Leonis interrupts her story because he found the book he was looking for. She asks him not to take the book from the vault, so he has to read it there. Suddenly, they receive a message from the administration office inviting all Academy representatives to a social gathering. Leonis is surprised that they will do it on the Hyperion battleship, and also that it is organized by Princess Alteria. After finishing reading the message, Leonis believes it's a good opportunity to approach the royal family, since they seem to be the only ones in charge of all humanity. Subsequently, he receives a call from Celia. She reminds him that they were going to eat together. However, as Leonis responds that he is busy and will eat alone, she clearly gets upset with him. Later, he tells Regina to go ahead because he wants to finish investigating before going to the port. Nevertheless, Regina asks him not to worry about her, as she has other things to do. The scene changes, and we see Bastea Kolosab from the Black Lion faction, revealing to his subordinates that the plan to kidnap the 4th royal princess, Alteria, has already begun. Fag is part of the elf race and believes that if they kidnap her, they could free their comrades imprisoned in the capital. Gers Hozak, on the other hand, complains that this area used to be a safe zone for the Sahan before the arrival of humans. Elsa, who is part of the clan of the Sun God, asks Bastia if they, who don't have a sacred sword, can confront the humans. However, Gers becomes furious upon hearing her question and tells her not to be a wet blanket. Elsa responds by saying she didn't ask him, further infuriating him, so Bastea asks him to calm down. They are then interrupted by a mysterious woman who calls the group cowards. Gers gets angry and asks her if she thinks she has a power superior to Orowa's to underestimate them in that way. She tells them that no, but reveals that she came to help them since she is also of the Sahin race and hates humans. She will give them power, one superior to that of the sacred swords. The mysterious woman summons her sword and begins to bestow power upon each of the Sahin. The first to receive this power is Bastea, who, unable to believe what happened, decides to test it. Realizing its power, he mentions that he thought only humans could have sacred swords. The woman responds that it is not a sacred sword, but a demonic sword given by a goddess. Gers, upon seeing the power his comrade obtained, thinks that kidnapping the princess will now be much easier. The woman then tells them that she will give cursed swords to all of them, so they can control the Hyperion and kidnap the princess. But before that, she needs them to do her a favor, revealing that her goddess requires a sacrifice in exchange for her power. Therefore, they must leave the user of the sacred sword alive. Bastia agrees to fulfill this request and asks the woman for her name. She responds that her name is Sharnak, an elf dark witch of the Forest of Shadows. Meanwhile, the protagonist in the city heads to the port and is amazed to see a human warship. He thinks that for his new army, he will need at least 2 ships of this size. He then goes to buy souvenirs for his subjects. Upon reaching the store, he discovers that elves still exist. The shopkeeper tells him that not only are there elves, but also other races such as werewolves and tigermen. In the next scene, the people of the city cheer for the princess, who waves a hand to greet them from her ship. However, her bodyguard advises her not to stray too far, as it will be difficult to protect her. Regina, from the top of a tower, observes the princess through a telescope. Leonis, on his part, approaches the princess's ship and believes that her fame and endearment could alter people's perception. Later, Leonis's friends arrive at the location, complaining that they were looking for him. Celia reproaches him for not informing them of the specific part of the port he would be at. However, Leonis shows her that he bought a souvenir for her as a thank you gesture for always looking out for him. Celia becomes emotional, expressing her happiness, but she also scolds him, warning that if he gives such gifts to other girls, he might become a demon king in the future. Leonis is surprised to hear about the demon king from Celia, and fine questions Celia, stating that it's too early for such jokes. Leonis, thinking it was just a prank, calms down, relieved that his identity remains undisclosed. He then inquires about Regina, and Celia reassures him that Regina won't be coming as she has other things to attend to today. Suddenly, they are interrupted by Fenris, who recognized Celia. Clearly, she approaches to greet them. Fenris asks Celia what she's doing there and inquires if she wants to see Monomiyu. Celia responds that they were invited to a social gathering and questions if Fenris only bothered to come and say that. Fenris explains that she came as a representative of the executive department, as the executives have a lot of work to do, unlike the Peloton 18, which is already free. Fine interrupts and asks them to stop fighting, but Celia doesn't give up and reproaches Fenris for making fun of Fine's face. Fenris clarifies that it wasn't her intention to mock Fine, and then she leaves. Before leaving, Fenris recalls that Celia has awakened her sacred sword, and for this reason, she congratulates her. Leonis, after she leaves, asks Celia who she is, and she responds that she is Fenris Edelritz. The scene changes, and we can see Bastea easily defeating the soldiers of the 7th Assault Garden, and subsequently, Gers steals the faces of the slain guards to infiltrate where Tyria is clearly located. During the welcome party, the girls enjoy various proposed activities. Leonis, on his part, tries to read a scroll and complains that, despite using copying magic to create a book, it is not what he expected, thinking that someone is trying to cover up the history of the past. While reading the scroll, he realizes that the 6 heroes, the goddess of rebellion, and the 8 demons are not mentioned in the books, finding it suspicious that he was told this part of history was lost in the Void's invasion, as there is no record of when magic extinguished or the development of magical technology. Suddenly, he is surprised by the presence of Shari, who shows him her new attire for the mission's success. She reveals that the power source of the city is a magical crystal armed with the city's artillery, and also equipped with what she thinks is a flying weapon. Leonis is surprised to hear this and then asks about the control room. Shari tells him that that part is currently under investigation, and thus, Leonis requests her to continue the investigation. But before she leaves, Leonis gives her a gift as a thank you for always accompanying him. However, Shari doesn't react as the protagonist expected, so he asks her what happened. She replies that she doesn't consider food a gift and then calls him foolish for thinking otherwise. While they argue, they are interrupted by the girls in swimsuits, which surprises Leonis, who clearly blushes. They invite him to swim, but he refuses, stating that the human body is not designed to float, and besides, he doesn't have swim trunks. The girl then asks if he really doesn't know how to swim, and Leonis, embarrassed, says that's not the case. Subsequently, Celia shows him that she has swim trunks for him, and also offers to teach him how to swim if he wants. The scene changes, and we see Leonis struggling to learn how to swim. Leonis thinks it's unfortunate for his subjects to see him like this, and believes he's weak. He also confesses to being nervous about Celia's strange swimsuit, which reveals her entire body. Meanwhile, the invited audience marvels at the protagonist's training, thinking that sacred swords never rest. However, Leonis is upset that he's the only one who doesn't know how to swim, and even the younger girls rejoice in knowing more. Later, we see the princess walking on her ship accompanied by her guards. Suddenly, they are attacked by Bastide and Giraffe, who have successfully infiltrated. Alex, the princess's bodyguard, is severely injured and urges Her Majesty to flee. However, Bastia grabs her arm, and seeing herself cornered, the princess asks Master K to escape. Sharnak tells Tyria that letting him escape will be useless, since soon they will be welcoming the public. The scene continues as the remaining infiltrators attack the people. Gers activates his Feign Steel, surprising everyone as they don't believe it's possible for him to wield a sacred sword. Furnace reproaches him, claiming it's a cheap trick, emphasizing that only humans can wield sacred swords. However, when Furnace attempts to prepare for combat, Elsa shoots her and repeats the warning to stay still if she doesn't want to die. Jack activates his bomb apple, threatening everyone. Gers instructs people that As soon as they unsheath their sacred swords, they will be automatically targeted by Jack's device, meaning the bomb will explode automatically. The infiltrators decide to confiscate communication devices from the people. Later, Gers informs the princess that she will be taken as a hostage. Upon hearing this, one of the onlookers asks about their objectives. Gers states that their goal is to free their comrades. Fenris reminds them that the Empire won't negotiate with terrorists. However, this greatly enrages Gers, who tells her that if that's the case, she clearly wants him to kill everyone. However, Elsa stops him and reminds him that they were ordered not to kill those with sacred swords. Gers reminds her that they already know they have to take them as sacrifices for the goddess, and takes the opportunity to tell Fenris about his new power, granted by the goddess, emphasizing that they should be grateful. Upon hearing about the goddess, Leonis is surprised, and before disappearing, he instructs Celia to protect the princess and initiate the alternative plan. Meanwhile, the princess activates the flagship as she feels threatened by the Sahins. Alteria asks Sharnak if she will do everything. She asks to leave the others alone, to which Sharnak responds affirmatively. Bastea asks the princess to head towards the kingdom. However, when Alteria plots the course, she detects a void invasion on the radar. Sharnak orders her to continue straight and cross through the voids, despite Bastea's surprise, realizing they will be swallowed by the voids. Sharnak explains that the sacred swordsman swallowed by rage and fear will be a sacrifice for the goddess, confessing that her plans don't matter at all. Bastea, realizing this, tries to confront her, but she calls him an idiot, kills him, and orders Girafe to follow her instructions if he wants to stay alive. Regina witnesses an incident on the ship, unmistakably belonging to the princess. Afterwards, she encounters the princess's pet, which relays the princess's instructions to seek help. Regina attempts to reach the ship with a jump as it starts to leave the port. Meanwhile, Leonis realizes he's lost until suddenly encountering the princess's pet alongside Regina. He inquires about its presence, and Regina responds that her younger sister is in grave danger. And so concludes the anime.